for me to do the two lectures in a row because they are more thematically combined, and the next two lectures will be from the western axis, the touristic and more seashore side, low residential settlement from the peninsula or the Izmir Bay. And I will, in the first presentation, I will talk about a architectural competition. It's a competition where they asked the acquisition of a sculpture and an urban area design integrated with the sculpture. I will talk about how this competition came about and how the method of acquiring a sculpture and the cultural policy towards acquiring art in urban projects changed in Izmir, as it's changing in all over the world. And let me begin by setting down what I mean by policy or policy context, at least as basic concepts. By cultural policy, we are talking about the political administration of culture, cultural funding, assets, institutions, and spaces of cultural production. The form of this administration may be direct, as in cultural bureaucracies, or indirect, in terms of the policy directives, strategy templates, and funding-dependent objectives that are impressed upon all organizations in receipt of public funds. Cultural policy was principally the public funding and administration of the categorically separate heritage, cultural, historical institutions, and the arts. However, it now encompasses the urban cultural economy, which of course can extend to the spaces of the creative industries and new media or technology-based enterprises. Nowadays, questions concerning the public cultural role of the artists, cultural management, cultural policy, and the city all converge on the question of art space. And what is an art space? A space for art, or given the potentially expansive and non-directive meaning of the term art, a space for culture. So how does a contemporary art space, given the heterogeneity and multivalency of art itself, achieve a substantive agency, capable of addressing public policy issues or confronting the agency of public policy itself? How do new art spaces construct an identity and public profile as a particular and valuable species of institution or perhaps social enterprise? Is it institutional in nature or social in content? What is the logic of its institutionalization and how does this construct agency? Creating art spaces is now central to a given city's development of its so-called creative economy. This is a major public policy development all across Europe, and Izmir seems to be trying to catch up with this. The city has become a vital asset to be reconstructed, branded, traded, leveraged in the strategic marketing of culture that is now normative in every major city. Whether city brand or other city identity scheme, destination marketing communications, design and architecture managed placemaking strategy, event-driven regeneration, the location of art is not stable, but dynamic and often appropriated in the cause of economic development. The space of art is therefore a space animated by discursive forces from outside of artistic production, which appropriate the space in a broader policy effort of cultural economic development. As a location, an art space is therefore not just physically determined by art producers or forms of production, but subject to the policy appropriation of its location, where the location, whether it be historical or social, becomes itself subject to overwhelming determinations, converting it into a place. This place is all too often a market construct and a significant part of the political imaginary of the neoliberal city. With this brief introduction, now we are here. In the morning we talked about the city center, and I mentioned that this is where our campus is located at. It's a 1-hour drive thanks to the recent highway. But for example, this longer distance you can cross within an hour, but this distance is more, there are narrow roads and it takes longer than an hour because you can't go fast. So this area is very mountainous and it's where we are talking about now.
I have a question. Why is the university so so not in the center of Izmir? Why is it so far away?
We ask that too. We ask that very often, and there is no. I mean, the area given to the university, it's always political. I mean, probably there was in its initiation. The time of the prime minister of the time had no director, and the director asked for a space, and they said, "Oh, here there are huge lands, and why don't you take them?" And sometimes, I mean, it's nice to have a campus outside of the city center but everything has to be planned according to that. I mean, you should also be able to arrange the villages. You have to arrange the economy adapted to that campus life. Right now, it's physically and socially very disconnected from any kind of.
So there was no city or village before the campus?
Yeah, there are villages, but we cannot really interact with those villages. I mean, we cannot really employ people, or we can't go into the villages to use their, I don't know, for lunch, for example. I mean, we could also arrange those things, but it's not planned very well. And if you happen to come to our campus, our buildings are so dispersed, and you cannot really walk from one building to the other, and people are really compartmentalized and detached from each other. It's a very bad planned campus, unfortunately. But the site is so beautiful. It's still, the landscape is, it's worth being there in summer. So 2006, this year, marks the 600th anniversary of a remarkable historical event in Izmir, named the Rebellion of Karaburu, that took place in Karaburu Peninsula in Izmir. Under the leadership of Mustafa, this is a historical figure, the peasants of Karaburu from various ethnic and religious backgrounds rose up against the Ottoman Sultan of the time with demands of common living and common use of property. Kind of a socialist and communal life demand for the time period. And their demands were rejected, and the uprising was brutally suppressed. The Sultan sent his troops and slaughtered the people uprising, basically. And Izmir Metropolitan Municipality has decided to commemorate the 600th anniversary of the rebellion as Year of Mustafa, accompanied with several social and cultural events. The competition was open to acquire the site of these commemorative events along with the sculpture. So if you are familiar with competitions, I don't know if you have ever entered into a competition before, the outcome is always in the foreground. I mean, everybody focuses in the product, but actually, when we talk about a successful competition, we are talking about a whole process, which involves the management who demands a certain object or a space to be designed, whether it be an urban design or a building, and then the management, through their advisors, gather up a jury formed of people specialized in this field. For example, for our competition, there were 3 sculptors, some of them academicians and some of them just professional sculptors. There were city planners, there were architects, and there were landscape architects in the jury. And that jury works on a binding document that kind of sets the principles of how they will evaluate the entering projects. And that is the document that sets those principles. And the next step is the different proposals come from different competitors, and then they evaluate the product. And after the announcement of the winners, people have a discussion, which is also called colloquium in Turkey. I don't know if you use the same name. The decision of the Metropolitan Municipality to open up this competition not only as a sculpture competition that is delimiting it within the fine arts, but rather as a memorial site, posing it as an interdisciplinary problem, was expressive of a will to change the cultural policy towards a more integrated approach to such diverse fields as art and architecture, heritage planning, tourism and local development. The binding document of the competition openly suggested to treat the sculpture not as a disparate object in space, but rather as an integral part of the site. Similarly, the competitors were recommended to enter the competition as interdisciplinary groups consisting of landscape designers, industrial designers, architects, city planners, and sculptors. This map shows the locations of the 15th century and current-day settlements in Karaburun, along with the sites of battle between Ottoman armed forces and Berkbüce Mustafa's rebellious villagers. In the history of the Ottoman Empire, the beginning of the 15th century corresponds to a period of interregnum. Do you know that term, interregnum? It's a process, it's a period where from 1403 until 1413, the Sultan Bayezid was dead, and he was killed by the Central Asian warlord Timur. And after his death, a period of civil war ensued as none of Bayezid's sons could establish primacy over the throne. So there wasn't a single sultan, there were his sons, but they were fighting over the throne. And the crisis was resolved when one of his sons, Mehmet, defeated and killed his brothers and re-established the empire. This is the context of the since these people could rebel within that interregnum period because there was a unstable power. What's interesting in this map is the current day settlements are shown with yellow. You can see that they are mostly on the seashore. And the settlements of the day, 15th century settlements, were here in the higher located parts within the mountainous cliffs, and that was of course a military tactic and strategic positioning within the peninsula. They could really fight a guerrilla warfare when the Ottoman troops approached from here and from the sea. They could hide into the cliffs and they could give a guerrilla warfare. And also what's interesting is that the most of the events took place around this narrow passageway and inside these valleys. But today's Karaburun is somewhere here, and this is where they asked us to place the sculpture and the site. Because when the municipality announces this, this is, for example, a critical approach to Ottoman history. I mean, normally in the official government and government members, this is something that they would not want to remember. But the city government is in the Progressive Party, Republic Party, ruled by the Republic Party, and they are in the opposition, and so they are using this event, and you know about the Gezi events in Taksim. So it's like a more of a developing a resistance culture and branding it, branding the city and this peninsula with that historical event, trying to establish a continuity between the past and the future. And what's also interesting is that when the uprising was suppressed, these people were taken away from here. Most of them got slaughtered, but they also got relocated to other places. And some other new people came here. And today, the people who live here are the descendants of people who have been brought here after the suppression of the event. So there is no actually a direct continuity between or in terms of the memory of these events. Those people don't remember what has been going on here in the 15th century, but the names of the places are kind of reminiscent because they are all mentioned like a Hell's Gate, a suffering site. The names carry the memory of those events, but when you talk to the villagers, they don't know anything about those events. This is a view from the current day Karaburun. The built environment, despite the insertion of a few modern-day, rather large-scale conventional buildings, preserves its low-density, idyllic character within nature. These are the modern-day insertions, some of them, these huge municipality buildings. This is the site of the competition. There is a bazaar area. You can also see that the traditional masonry buildings are being replaced with conventional reinforced concrete buildings. The main area to be designed is this upper level, and which is connected to the lower level bazaar area here with a ramping street from here and a staircase. During the bazaar days on Wednesdays, this lower level is packed with people, and however, during the rest of the week, it's deserted. This is this upper level on a rainy day. The site does not have a view of the sea. Towards the south, it has a very nice view of these solemn, steep mountain drops, which also gives an introverted quality to the site. You can see the approach here from the town center, and walking from the town center, you cannot get sense of this opening here until you come to this very point. So it also creates an interesting surprise effect in the pedestrian access. And the ramping street connects the two levels here, and there is a small public fountain at the corner. The two large pine trees provide shadow, which were asked to be preserved in everybody's proposal. And the conic membrane of the bazaar area has a strongly felt presence at the site. And this is the actual problem of the site. It's a very ugly facade between the two levels, and this whole facade is asked to be redesigned, including this artificial waterfall here. You can see that the staircase is used by people during the bazaar days. So even if you want to cut off the upper level from the lower level, you have to find a solution to the access of the people during the bazaar days. So, trying to formulate an approach to this change in cultural policy, which involves the in the name of the competition itself, you can see that it's not opened as a monument competition, although the figure of the Berklüce Mustafa has the name of the competition. It was opened announced as a sculpture and site design competition, which already says something about the institutions, the management's approach to this site. When we talk about a monument, this monument is actually designed by a sculptor, Austrian sculptor, Anton Hanak, who came to Ankara in 1932. And this is a sculpture from Ankara in Güven Park in the city center. And the reason I put it, I wanted to explain the difference between a monument approach and a counter-monument approach, because the reason they put this separately kind of gives us a hint about the result they want to achieve. I mean, they didn't want a monument. Instead, let's discuss, in fact, the difference between the monument and the counter-monument. This is a sculpture from 1932, and it's actually, he visited many quarries and planned the defense Anton Hanak, and he wanted to build a monument that would face two sides. The bronze figures, which were to be put on the front side, were casted in Ertberg foundry in Vienna. But he couldn't finish it, and he died in 1934, and the construction of the monument was undertaken by another Austrian colleague, Joseph Torak. The main decision was for me to take the classical monument, which is composed of a pedestal, figures, gigantic positive figures, and invert that quality to get rid of the pedestal and to sit the sculpture right away on the plane, and then to get rid of the positivity and replace it with a negativity. A very simple idea. And the reason I started with this was, I'm not a sculptor, but this competition was as I said, ideally was an interdisciplinary team work, but my working conditions would not allow me to collaborate with different people. I wouldn't be able to sit down on a table and discuss how we should do it. And actually in Turkey, when you ask a sculptor to collaborate with an architect, the egos of the discipline work quite in complicated ways, and you cannot really tell them how to acquire something that fits the demands of this project, because they prefer working with more traditional sculpture understanding. So I thought this area requires something more non-monument, more counter-monument, and almost something like an installation art rather than a classical sculpture. So what I did was to work on the figures, and when we consider the figure of the Berklija Mustafa, we don't have any access to any kind of representation from the 15th century. No picture of him, no sculpture or anything any text that describes his features. We don't know what he looked like. But I figured that him alone didn't mean something, like putting him as a leader didn't mean something, because he wasn't alone in this uprising and he had other people around him. So the idea was not actually trying to depict the figure, but rather the absence of this figure, and trying to get something that gives this feeling of togetherness and solidarity, but also the absence of these figures today. For example, one of the other entrants to the competition proposed something like this. He proposed how he looked like, how he dressed like, but we don't have any access. This is the more monument approach towards the competition. So once I kind of found this sculpture figure approach, I started to think about the ground of the competition. And this is a geological three-dimensional map of the peninsula. A friend of mine gave me a program. I don't know if you are using these programs. This is a global mapper, is something that geologists use. I had the whole three-dimensional model of the peninsula. And at first I really thought this would be advantageous for me to propose something related with the model of the peninsula. And I worked on several different options, but then I couldn't find any suitable way to locate that model within the site. For example, one of these ideas was to put that negative figure right at the narrow passageway where most of the battles took place. So these figures would be positioned to kind of safeguard the whole peninsula. But then later I decided to use it more metaphorically. This is the approach from the town center, and this is the direction of the mountaintops where most of the battles took place. So I thought maybe using the peninsula itself as a hand reaching the current day residents who were actually not coming from this rebellious background, but kind of they would be summoned to resist by this sculpture. And there is a current day mosque, 100 years old Ottoman mosque here. And we know that these figures, the leadership of the rebellion, the Berklice Mustafa, wanted to abolish this difference between different religious backgrounds. So I thought maybe this mosque would be the nice place to bring together different symbols, and the sculpture itself would be located here. It could be seen from the town's center approach with the background, the mountains providing the background. That was the second decision. This axis, the visual axis, to see the sculpture with the mountains. And then our main different approach to the site was to create a different approach to the site. This was the everyday routine access, and there was no access from here. You had to go through the residential courtyards, and you had to walk around and then approach from here. And this was the proposal that the jury really liked in this, and this project got an equal mention prize. But I will also explain that the first project got disqualified, the winner, because it was a plagiarized proposal. So we were actually supposed to be the third in this project. And then the second decision was to create this axis, and then there was the axis of the bazaar and its shed to create to locate the sculpture at the intersection of these main three axes, and then play around with the solid and ground differences, solid and void in the ground. So this area was sunk into the ground about half a meter to create a sitting place and to create a void in the ground. And then there were certain figures of solid and void to create a certain sense of scale inside the opening. This is the final ground floor plan. This whole area was created as a small sculpturesque access by itself. I wanted to give this impression that the whole area, the whole site should be designed as a sculpturesque project. There shouldn't be any difference between art and architecture, but even the functional elements like staircases should be designed in a sculpturesque manner. This is the section of that approach. There are reliefs at this level, and then that's the sculpture, and there is a toilet underneath. This is the bazaar area, and there is access to the toilets from the bazaar area. We had to find a midway between the functional demands of the people. Most of the projects actually got rid of the toilets, and they didn't want to give access to this level. They just wanted to create a very cheap place that, like a memorial site, but the everyday use of the area didn't really matter for most of the competitors. This is also the section from the bazaar. You can see that there is a 6 meters difference between the two levels. This is the, you can see that the area, the sunken peninsula reaches towards the town center approach. And this project's proposal also included something that these black areas are marbles, that there are inscriptions on it from the book written by Börklüce Mustafa. Börklüce Mustafa was generally acknowledged as if he was only a local peasant guy who was heroic and who wanted to uprise, and he was a fighter. Yes, he was, but also it turned out that he wrote a book, and it was a really intellectual contribution to the Islamic literature, and nobody actually acknowledges that aspect of him. So we wanted to emphasize his intellectual side rather than his military side. And we put some excerpts from his book here and at this part of the site, the two entrances. This is from the upper level. You can see that the sculptures actually, the figures can be recognized from certain perspectives. You don't have to see the figures from every perspective. Sometimes there is no figure. There's just this zigzagging, like as if a thunder hits the ground. Something that tells us about the suffering that took place, and the material was copper, but it's rusty copper, you know. So people can stand here and can feel emphatic about the events that took place there if they know about it, and if they don't know about it, it's fine. It's just a sculpture in the site, and most of the people living here don't know about this. So I thought they shouldn't be forced to acknowledge a pseudo-memory, but those that want to associate themselves with this memory, the historic event, they could still do that. Otherwise, the area was designed as a space of the commons. Müşterekler means commons. This area was designed as a forum where they could sit and talk about the problems of the peninsula, the commons, the common problems like town council meets. This is again from the reliefs and the inscription from the book. In terms of landscape, in terms of the flowers here and there were, and this pomegranate tree was the local symbol of Karaburun. This symbol was produced from the Berkülce B and Mustafa M, but it's also the cross symbols kind of deconstructed and abstracted. And this edge also is coming from the David star, but they are all very hidden, that they are not announcing themselves to be religious symbols, but there is actually a convergence of the three different religions and the pains, sufferings experienced by these people at the time. But these are all very hidden messages. They are not really announcing themselves. Yeah, this is again the concrete, white concrete. There is again a public fountain I replaced here. And we find the sculptures in relief form here. Again, the fountain at the corner was replaced with a more something that tells us about the overall site. Actually, none of the other competitors proposed any fountains. In our entry, there were 3 new fountains. These little fountains mean a lot to the people living in such a village scale. I mean, they would look for it. They would ask for when you're replacing a whole urban area, you should be actually again propose something about the things that you have removed. So we didn't want to get rid of those altogether. Eventually, we presented 6 posters, and we also presented a model, but we couldn't finish the model. That's why we got the 3rd prize. My friend had to buy a larger to work on this model. It was a huge model and very detailed. At least we couldn't find the best way to construct it. We could have done a better job. So that's the first lecture.